Hi, my name is Dr. Robert Priebe. I am the creator of the vlog entitled Parks Are Like Icebergs, where I share 4 decades of parks planning, park system planning, and park service operationalization with you for free on my vlog. Um, Influenced by my recently completed PhD studies that used institutional theory to interrogate how parkland decision-making occurred in Edmonton from 1960 to 2010. So today I'm going to talk about Gallagher Park and within a kind of a broader societal setting, and that is wicked planning problems. So what is a wicked planning problem? So first of all, when we talk about wicked planning problems, it's a wicked planning problem is not one that's wicked good. It's never good kind of thing. It's really complicated. It's basically an issue where it's basically they're very complex decisions to make depending on the issue you're trying to solve. So what is a wicked planning problem? So there are multiple characteristics. So first of all, the root causes of whatever you think are the problem are difficult to find kind of thing. There are unclear causalities, like what's made this an issue that we need to address. Um, there are multiple ways, depending on how you might approach it, how you might approach it to fix it, kind of thing. There are, and with multiple intervention points. So you could fix it in this way and that way. You could do multiple, multi-targeted activities or actions to fix something. Um, Solutions are often impacted by external events. So in the case of, we'll talk a little bit about here, wicked planning problem in Gallagher Park, we're going to talk about the big one that impacts Gallagher Park, or one of them, is climate change. So and Edmonton has little control over climate change other than what we can do to reduce our footprint, our ecological footprint. Um, there is no single expertise that can tell you the route you should take. That's not to say there won't be one kind of expertise that will guide the decision-making process, but there isn't a home that will fix all the problems of parks planning in the River Valley. There isn't a set of policies even. We tend to create policies that will direct how we fix things. And I'm going to read a quote from planning scholar Don Schoen, I think he pronounced his name, and he was talking about policies, and he said, um, policies are a swampy lowland, I love that term, where solutions are confusing messes incapable of technical solutions. So what he basically saying is you end up with a whole bunch of policy directive that overlap and are high levels. So coming up with the solution is never easy to do or even possible to do. Um, and that aligns with what I found in my own research when I look at how parkland decision making occurred in Edmonton in, from 60 to 2010, where I looked at there wasn't a policy directive that supported it, but there wasn't a policy directive that didn't support it either, kind of thing, believe it or not. So at the end of the day, these are really messy problems to fix or to address. So what's the one that I'm talking about here? So this really applies to the River Valley more broadly, but I'll use Gallagher Park as kind of an example of what I mean. So first of all, we know parks are evaluated differently than other public lands, particularly, but other land uses, period. Um, Park benefits and outcomes are measured by social measures, social capital development, reduction of intolerances, um, connection to your neighbor, connection to nature, which is an ecological, environmental benefit. There's health and wellness benefits. So you get out and get some exercise, or which helps your physical health. So it may reduce obesity. It may help you de-stress to either just get out in the park and run, or play in a playground, or simply get away from things, kind of thing. So there's multiple metrics that occur that parks are evaluated about, which is very different when you think about if a commercial land use down in downtown, it has a particular land site. It's defined by property lines. Its value is dependent on what's around it and what you want to do with it, kind of thing. You can come up with a dollar value in terms of what that land is worth, and you can figure out a dollar value on what that taxes will be generated. So those are easier things to get your head around, whereas social benefits are measured not even locally necessarily. Health and wellness, not even measured locally. So metrics are all different. So that's what makes parks challenging and interesting from my perspective. Now, so how does that relate to Gallagher Park? So Gallagher Park is part of our River Valley Park system. We are in a process where there's a planning exercise occurring today that's suggesting that we need to plan for a doubling. So from 1 million to 2 million people will be living in Edmonton in 40, 50 years from now. So logically, you can assume that we'll have double the amount of people coming into the river valley. So the question becomes, what kind of development is appropriate in the river valley? Now that has always been limited to it, as it's been preserved as a park with recreational amenities. Recreational amenities can include trails, can include picnic areas, benches, park furniture. There's some rec facilities. There's some bridges that facilitate trail use on both, bring people back and forth across the river, kind of thing. There's some washrooms in the river valley. There's some cultural historical places like Urath House in the river valley, John Jansen Nature Center. So there are those are all recreational leisure kind of things that occur in the river valley. And as we expand to the outer reaches of the city, kind of thing, we're going to get more and more people on the edge of the river valley, and just more people in the river valley. So the question becomes, and I'm going to give a broad question, then I'm going to talk about three specific things. So first of all, the question becomes, what's appropriate in the river valley? What should we prioritize? What should we privilege? Or how are we going to mediate between different requests, different things that people may want to do in the river valley? Now, Gallagher Park is interesting. It has been the site of the picture behind me is from the Folk Music Festival. The recent one just finished this past weekend. The Folk Music Festival has been in the River Valley since 1981. The Edmonton Ski Club is in the River Valley since 1911, literally. They're building a new ski club facility in partnership and in concert with the festival people, an Indigenous group, as well as the Flying Canoe group, kind of thing. So, and there's there's an Indigenous sport group that's going to be part of the new master plan, or the new rec facility, the ski club facility. So it's been here a long time, but it has always drawn a lot of people into the river valley. So as we go forward, what do we think we should have in the river valley? to unpack that, I've looked at three different things. So that's asked more questions. And quite frankly, there aren't specific answers because it's very complex at this point. So the first question is, so historically, we've always had recreation and ecological natural heritages that have coexisted. Now, that coexistence hasn't always been great for some rather than others. So, for example, um, there was a time when for example, White Mud Nature Preserve was a coal mined area. So there was coal mining done in White Mud, what is now White Mud Nature Preserve. So it was an industrial site. Now we've said it's going to be a recreational site. And it's got the Tufa Springs in it, which is a unique landform, geological landform in the river valley. But it's within the White Mud Nature Preserve. So the question becomes, well, how do we ensure we protect that? Do we keep people out, or do we just do it signage? Do we design people away from it? Allow them to interpret it from a distance. So there's kind of that kind of nitty-gritty on a particular site. How do we do that? In the River Valley Alliance Plan of Action, the city and its partners built 3 new bridges. Those had a pretty substantive environmental impact when they were built. Both the construction itself and even the production of materials like cement has a pretty substantial ecological impact. Some in the community weren't thrilled with the extent of that impact. Which is fair. It did have no question it had an environmental impact, and some of those impacts, the planning for it required them to be mitigated or mediated to the best they could. But there's those kinds of tensions between recreational and ecological protection kind of thing. In some places in the States, they literally fence off places and say you ain't going in there kind of thing. So there's always been a little bit of a tension there's always been a tension between ecological planners, you might say, and recreation and leisure planners. So that's one level. So how do we work those groups together? Because they, in essence, have different worldviews, right? One is more preservation oriented, one is more activity oriented. It's not to say you can't come up with solutions, but that's kind of a tension that's underlies things. Second, what we have here also is a scenario. So if you think about Elk Island National Park, if Elk Island National Park is being overused, they close the gate. There's been discussions of Jasper National Park and Banff National Park being overused, and you can literally close the gate so people don't get in, kind of thing. In the River Valley, you have a scenario where there's going to be 2 million people, so 1 million on either side of the River Valley, ballpark numbers. And there are multiple places to get into the River Valley. So you can ride a bike on a trail down into the River Valley. You can drive and park in a parking lot in the River Valley. You can take the LRT into the River Valley in Cloverdale near the Gallagher Park. There are multiple stairs across the River Valley that get people in and out of the River Valley, and the stairs even have a piece of wood that allows you to take your bike up and down into the River Valley. Some of these stairs are pretty steep, and some areas are less accessible than others. In the downtown, where there is a concentration of people, we built a mechanized River Valley access, which we also now called the funicular. That basically, we've had funiculars in the past, but this was kind of modeled on that idea to some extent, although it physically doesn't look like a funicular. But anyways, it gets people from from the downtown into and out of the river valley for those that have mobility challenges for whatever reasons, wheelchair bound or old folks like me, kind of thing, need an elevator to get down there. So that's the second category of problems that are difficult to, okay, so you want, say, whether you wanted to take one worldview or not, how are you gonna control the externalities of activities, kind of thing. The third area is, and I think this doesn't get enough airplay, and this is what happens out of the river valley impacts what happens in the river valley. So you see the city has moved to densify developments. They call it legalized higher density housing in mature areas. So what does that mean? What will that mean in practice? What that will mean in practice is they're going to be cutting down mature tree canopy on private lands and able to build two residential buildings or more on a single lot, kind of thing. They're also, in doing that, they're taking away the private permeable surfaces. So your backyard acts as a sponge for when rain events come. What happens is the water goes into the trees and into the soil and ultimately gets down into the river valley in a pretty low-key, slow way, kind of thing. The city in the suburban mature areas are also selling off existing permeable surfaces, commonly referred to as parkland. So where we do have permeable surfaces, the city is decide, oh, we're just going to sell off some land. And the whole rationale behind all of this is A, we need more density, and I agree with that. And B, we need a more affordable housing. And they're basically using an income. Their solutions are such that if they think they create more dense housing, housing prices will fall. I personally don't think that's the problem. The problem is the financialization of the housing industry. So we will get more density, no question. But what will that mean down the road in the river valley? So when you take away all the mature trees that suck up water, when you take away big chunks of our of private permeable surfaces and sell even private or public permeable surfaces, that will create urban heat islands. And recent research by Sandeep Agrawal from the University of Alberta has flagged this issue in his research, where basically you're creating a whole bunch of urban heat islands. And what will also happen is the lack of permeable surfaces will mean all of that. So when you have extreme weather events like we're projected to have due to climate change, you will have more of that water getting into, more of it collected into the sewer system rather than into the soils, and increasing amounts and intensity than ever before that will end up through our sewer system, storm sewer system, into the river valley. We've already had, I was around in 1984 in Edmonton when we had river valley flooding. This will enhance that frequency and intensity. So we will get more and more river valley flooding. So that flooding is going to take away some of those natural heritages that we love so much. And I say that sincerely, that River Valley is an amazing natural site, natural-like site. I love the trees, I love the birds, I love the critters. So it's a great place. Those natural amenities are at risk all the parks infrastructure we put in there, be they rec facilities, trails, bridges, washrooms, all of those will be at risk of flooding, which means if you're going to replace them, it's going to be expensive. And I believe the city is self-insured, so it's not like, unless we can get money from the feds in the province, haha, for, replacement. It'll be very expensive for Edmonton taxpayers. So when we have major storm events, the river valley will be at risk. We also know from climate change history that we've had periods of drought that have led to created the conditions for wildfires to spread. Just ask people in Jasper, Fort McMurray, Lytton, BC, California, you name it. So what if we get the wrong wind coming down the river valley at the wrong time and wrong place? We very well could have wildfire spreading into the river valley. And I think, quite frankly, we have been very lucky that the wildfire hasn't reached in any scope or scale in the river valley as yet, because we've have protected the trees in the river valley as well. So with climate change, our river valley is at risk, in part because of the approach the city is taking on tablelands, where they are taking away permeable surfaces either through private redevelopment in terms of housing or selling off our park sites, some of our park sites. And they're not selling off all of them, guys, but there are selling them off, and they're listed on the city website for purchase. These are not sites that are necessarily being set aside for Homeward Trust, which is a not-for-profit housing corporation. There's an Indigenous people housing organization. I would have less issues with them doing that on those sites because they remain for the public use. Many of the sites are being marketed to developers for at market price housing. So when we talk about what's appropriate in the river valley, you need to think about what kind of recreation and ecological things we should prioritize or not. Second of all, we need to think about how we're actually control use of the river valley. We already have damage from feral mountain bikers. There's some encampments that have been created that have created fires that could spread in the river valley as well, not to mention the inherent unsafety of the people that live in those homeless camps due to for multiple reasons, many of them whom have no control over their future, kind of thing. So how do we manage that kind of issue in the river valley? And then third, how can we plan so that in the long term we're not creating worse problems in the river valley, but what are you doing outside the river valley? So as you can see, there's probably there isn't a single area of expertise that will help you solve these problems. What is required is a systems approach, thinking deeply about how all these pieces connect together and come up with a solution that's not driven by one particular ideology, which today seems to be economic ideology is driving the bus at City Hall. So let's hope that we can save our river valley or protect it for Edmonton's long-term use as originally proposed by Frederick Todd in Edmonton about 115 years ago. Thanks for listening, and I hope you read my vlog here, and you can download my other vlogs and read about other parks related issues. Thank you.